As a man, I often find myself avoiding fights and confrontations not because I am scared, but because I have responsibilities and people who depend on me. I believe walking away is usually the smarter and safer choice. However, people around me, including some friends and family, often say that if they were in my position, they would have used violence or made the other person regret what they did. It makes me question myself sometimes. Am I being weak by not standing up aggressively, or is choosing to walk away a sign of maturity and self-control? I would really appreciate hearing how others see this. Story 1. If someone is willing to resort to violence, they need to accept that they could ruin their lives. I have witnessed someone take a single punch to the face, fall back, strike their head, and die. The person who threw the punch served jail time. Both men had families. 2 lives and families ruined, all because someone did not like the phrase, "Whatever, bro." It takes a stronger person to walk away and avoid violence than it does to threaten and start fighting. 99% of the time, the people who say, "If I were you, I would have stood up and beaten them," are always the people who have been beaten or, in fact, sit there staring blankly at the floor. The majority of people, particularly males, are all talk and have far less fighting prowess and skill than they think they do. Story 2. Knowing how to avoid a fight is the most responsible thing you can do. There is a fine line. You should be able to stand your ground without escalating the situation or angering the other person. Story 3. No, my brother's friend started a fight, and his other friend got stabbed and died when he tried to step in. The attacker just shoved the guy off and pulled a knife, stabbing him. People are crazy. I would avoid a fight whenever possible. Story 4. Historically, violence was often seen as the answer, but it does not make you less of a person when you choose to avoid it. Unless you or a loved one is in danger, there is no reason to risk being killed, killing someone, or anything in between. I encourage everyone to learn how to defend themselves, whether through hand-to-hand combat or carrying and practicing with your concealed carry weapon, so you can save your own life or the life of someone else in an emergency. Be peaceful, not harmless. Thank you. Story 5. As someone who grew up opposite, you are more of a man than I am. Childhood trauma blew my fight or flight fuse before I could understand what it was, so I did not know flight. I fought a lot without really understanding why. If someone wants to talk down to me, I would rather lose a fight than let someone get away with it in the worst case. It was not until I was older, having 4 brothers, and seeing my younger brothers doing the same thing that I realized how unnecessary it is and how many people think that is the answer, especially under the influence. Fight when there is no option but to walk away to avoid confrontation. I always thought if they start it, I am in the right, not seeing how ignorant I was. Now I look at my healed but busted beak and laugh at myself for being so stupid. I deserved it. Story 6. I am a physically weaker man but stood my ground against the mentally weak in person. Masculinity is not one thing, and when I got my ass beaten at a show, someone stopped it because that man saw it was not fair. It does depend on the situation, though. At a bar with a random person? Who cares? Someone threatening family? Step up. Story 7. I have a concealed carry permit. I box recreationally for exercise. I have never been in a fight, and I never want to be in a fight. I walk away unless given no other choice. You can question my masculinity, insult, and belittle me, but I will not respond until my safety or the safety of someone I care about is threatened. Story 8. Avoiding fights and conflicts is as smart as you can be. Who would want to willingly put themselves in a position where they could be seriously injured or even lose their life? Why wouldn't I avoid a fight if I could get hit in the head and suffer lifelong consequences? Story 9. I guess it depends on the context. If you are weak and out of shape, then you would likely lose the fight. It wouldn't be as noble or impressive to walk away in that circumstance compared to if you were physically capable. I am not dismissing it. People will use words until they lose, and then will resort to a strategy they can win with, such as physical violence. To me, this is very much like high school bullying. At the end of the day, getting into a fight is a roll of the dice. You could get physically injured, possibly permanently. The fight could go too far, they could fall, hit the curb, and die. They could have a knife or be part of a gang, or they could be a vengeful person. Is it really worth it over words? If someone were kidnapping your child, then go feral. You might say, I need to gain some fighting experience so I would win when it counts. In that case, go to a self-defense class or boxing. Story 10. Obviously, you should not go around starting fights. You should also avoid getting dragged into needless fights over petty issues that genuinely do not matter. You should always aim to resolve things without violence. You should not hide behind that attitude to avoid the conflicts you should face. Some issues can bring genuine suffering to you or those closest to you if you allow them to fester, and some opportunities could literally turn your life around if you manage to get through someone's resistance. With all that being said, you are still going to get your best results by being capable of great violence and then choosing not to enact it. This is almost entirely mindset. You do not need to be able to physically defeat anyone, but you may face people who will try to intimidate or coerce you with at least an implied threat of force. What you need to understand about them is that they are always looking for an easy target. The ideal mindset to bring to the table is something like this. If you get violent against me, I will fight back. I will cause you great pain before you are done, and I am willing to take whatever it is you will do to me afterward. That kind of attitude is generally enough to scare anyone away. No one wants to get hurt. Even most people who are violent do not want to get hurt. Being capable of hurting others is the best insurance of never actually having to do so. Story 11. A wise man once told me, being brave doesn't mean looking for trouble. Life is not a video game. All these random battles being offered are not worth anything when you win. They will not drop a bunch of loot or make you think, wow, I'm glad I fought that guy. Most people talk about what they would have done, but most do not actually do anything. Story 12. Avoiding physical fights does not make you a coward. Not being able to handle nonviolent confrontations and disagreements absolutely makes you a coward. People who resort to violence first are generally not very wise. Consider reassessing how smart the people around you are. Story 13. Nope. Be yourself and just like who you are. I have never been in a fight as I was always the quiet one. However, I played a lot of sports and was also solidly built. Story 14. People only say it is a cowardly move because they like to see drama. Avoiding conflict increases your chances of survival. Story 15. Avoiding conflicts, yes. Resolving conflicts, no. Standing up aggressively seldom solves the issue. Story 16. Everyone talks tough when it is hypothetical or someone else's situation. People who try to intimidate or use violence to solve everything are buffoons or end up in jail, injured, or dead. Knowing when to walk away and when to hold your ground and stand up for yourself is important. Violence should always be an absolute last resort. I am 5 feet 7 inches tall and am almost always the shorter or smaller person in a situation. I can handle myself but never want to be in that situation. De-escalate however you can. There are very few situations where violence is actually the right answer. Story 17. Being weak is being weak. Getting sucked into pointless conflict that could ruin lives is pointless. I have found that in the heat of the moment, most men say, I wouldn't have let that go, etc. But then, after considering the possible negatives with critical thinking, they turn and say, yeah, it's probably not worth it. Others still say, yeah, I would just knock them out, or jump back to that line of thinking. Going forward, for future reference, they are emotionally reactive and lacking judgment. It is strange to consider that some people just cannot process situations the same way. Story 18. If someone wants to possibly get hurt or killed or end up doing time, that is their prerogative. You do not have to follow them or be like them. Story 19. Jigoro Kano, the founder of judo, said, consider fully, act decisively. I am a judo black belt, and I carry this message with me wherever I go. If I am not going to go 100%, then I will not get violent. If my life or the lives of loved ones are threatened, only then will I throw someone headfirst into the concrete and accept whatever consequences follow. That said, I have pinned a few people and let them cool off before. This is why I always advocate that all men should learn some grappling. Story 20. Being able to walk away from a fight is mature. It does not make you weak. However, you still need to be proficient at violence. Running away from a fight is a different matter. People say that violence is never the answer. Most of those who say that have never been in a situation where meeting violence with greater violence was the only solution. Story 21. Yes, but that is not necessarily a bad thing. Being a coward is just a label. Keeping yourself healthy and alive is more important than worrying about your masculine honor or anything like that. Story 22. People often say that if they were in my shoes, they would have used violence or made the other person regret what they did. In the absence of facing consequences, talk is cheap. Being in the moment and having to weigh the consequences of each action, avoiding a fight is often the better option to risking injury to yourself. No one really wins a fight. When we think of the winner of a fight, we are looking at the person who was hurt the least. But even if you hit them and they hit the ground, as the saying goes, you still face legal repercussions. What is worse? To be hit once and shamed in front of other men, or to spend the night in county lockup with drunks and other troublemakers? Or maybe you fought on a Friday night and they do not let you out until Monday. I would say you lost that fight personally. Story 23. Avoiding violence is always the best approach. It is not like before when most men would fight you. Nowadays, you are more likely to get shot. Story 24. No, it is smart to avoid violence. People who resort to violence over even small matters seem like cavemen to me. Story 25. Confrontations can lead to injury or death, so it is wise to avoid them. I gladly avoid conflicts over trivial matters. However, the reason for avoiding them is important. If it is fear and an inability to be violent, then you are a coward. If you are capable of violence but avoid it to prevent legal issues or injuries over insignificant matters, then you are not a coward. Story 26. You are doing the right thing. Physical confrontation can lead to injury, death, or imprisonment. It is not worth taking the chance. Story 27. The only reason to fight is to physically defend yourself or someone else who is being physically attacked. Walking away is always the best option otherwise. Story 28. My late Aikijujutsu teacher used to say the first thing you should do in a conflict is try to de-escalate. A fight that did not happen is a fight both parties win. Story 29. The short answer is no. Violence is often an answer, but it is rarely the best answer. Violence also carries consequences, from death to jail time. It is up to the individual to decide if it is worth it. The only caveat is that there are two types of fights: those for your pride and those for your safety. The first type should be avoided at all costs, and the second type may be unavoidable. In this scenario, having some training to rely on is a good idea. The training will also boost your confidence and reveal that most people who talk or brag about fighting are lying or trying to cover their own insecurities. Story 30. How often do you have fights and conflicts that could become physical? You are acting as if this happens frequently. I am 43, and my early 20s were the last time I can recall coming close to getting into a fight. Story 31. The only thing violence is good for is protecting yourself from harm. Outside of that, no adult problems are fixed by throwing punches. Even people who make their living being violent are usually doing so at the behest of other, more powerful people. Violence is the weakest tool in the human toolbox, to be used mainly on dangerous animals and those that behave like them. Story 32. There is a difference between fighting and confrontation. There is also a difference between disagreeing and confrontation. Fighting should be reserved for self-defense. Avoiding confrontation or calling someone out about their actions can certainly be cowardly. However, discussion is best if the other party is willing. Story 33. At school, I had a teacher who told me that a man is someone who can control his emotions, and being unable to do so is a sign of weakness and immaturity. Whenever I see anyone fight, either physically or emotionally, I think of this. I believe that if someone insults you and you do not reply, you are far more mature than they are. You do not need external validation for your sense of self-worth. Story 34. It depends on the context. I would only say you are a coward if you have no other options. Most people have many other options. Story 35. You say you are not scared. You should be. The consequences of a fight can be catastrophic. I always avoid fighting at all costs, unless the health of my children is at risk. Story 36. I grew up as a teenager in the 1980s in one of the poorest areas of the country. At that time and in that place, you would have been called a coward or other derogatory names for not standing up for yourself. I was a normal kid, somewhat shy, and didn't want any issues with anyone. Fast forward a few years, and I had an event in my life that, while it didn't change me overnight, did change me. I finally got tired of people messing with me and feeling like a coward. One day, something just snapped. A few days later, during that weekend, everything changed. I am now 54. Do I look back and think how lucky I was when I see how things are done today? Yes, that was a different time, and the consequences of what I did then are absolutely nothing compared to now. Do I think violence solves a lot of issues? Yes, because I have seen it solve almost every issue when those actions are warranted. Would I do the same thing now as I did then? Absolutely not. It is just not worth it. I avoid places where I think that type of thing can occur. Not because I am a coward now, but because I know what I have done in the past, and I don't want those same types of things to continue to happen. In 2025, I would be in jail or prison for things I did in the 1980s. Unless I absolutely have to be violent, I refuse to be baited into such nonsense. As has been mentioned elsewhere, most people who say they would do this or that will not act when it comes to real conflict. It is all fun and games until you are hurt, missing a tooth, a broken nose, or worse. So disregard what your friends and family say unless they have actually been in more than one fight beyond that one time on the playground in 3rd grade. Be smart. Don't look for trouble. Avoid it if at all possible. But if it cannot be avoided, be prepared to do whatever you think you need to do to protect your safety. Story 37. Genuine fights? No, that likely makes you smart. Conflict at all, like arguments and discussions? Likely, yes. Now, engaging with conflict is not the same thing as being belligerent. For example, at work, I have ineffective supervisors. I disagree and object a lot. I don't yell or behave unprofessionally, but I engage. If you go through life avoiding conflict, you are ceding a lot of control and likely letting many bad things happen. Story 38. I am a nobody. However, I have been training in combat sports for years, and I know how to take and throw a punch. 100% of the time, I am walking away. I do not care what I am called. It is just not worth it. Story 39. I would be less concerned about all of that and more concerned about why you often find yourself in situations where you have to avoid a fight developing. I am 43 years old and have never been in a situation that even came close to physical violence. What is going on that you are apparently regularly in situations on the brink of violence? Story 40. No, I do not know why anyone would think that avoiding conflict and fights is anything less than reasonable. Sometimes in life, you just look at the situation and cannot help but think if it is worth the energy to have a conflict, a fight, or an argument. Almost every time I look at a situation from this perspective, I say absolutely not. There is no need to be aggressive. Story 41. One of my karate instructors said the best martial art is track and field. Fights should be avoided at all costs. You can always ruin your life another time. Story 42. I'm right there with you. I'm adult and mature enough to know when to walk away from a problematic or unsafe situation. I have children. I'll stand up for myself, but I'm not going to voluntarily walk into a bad situation and risk something happening to my life, safety, or those of my children. I would rather not lose my freedom, home, kids, or life because I decided to get violent or seek revenge, especially coming from having lived in a state where most people openly carry firearms. You just can't trust people to keep their cool, so you have to do your best to keep yours. I was recently at my kids' sporting event when the opposing team's coaches and parents became visibly angry and on the verge of violence, to the point where the game was instantly ended and everyone was advised to walk away. The opposing party started marching angrily toward our side in rage, looking to cause trouble and start fighting. I grabbed my kids and left immediately. There was no sense in marching back toward them and choosing violence, risking unknown consequences for me and my kids. In that moment, I chose us. Story 43. That dad was a boxer and commando in the Royal Navy. To look at him, you'd see a man in a tweed coat, incredibly unassuming. I got beaten up pretty badly for no real reason by a few of the local toughs, and Dad was concerned seeing me stagger in with bumps, bruises, and a bloody mouth. I said it was nothing, but he insisted we go and have a chat with them. I knew they'd be at the local billiards hall, so off we went. As we walked in, my father went over to the owner, introduced himself, shook the man's hand, and explained the situation. There were 4 guys in the back. Dad walked up to them calmly while I hung back. He started talking to them. Then one man made the mistake of taking a swing at him. Probably less than 20 seconds later, this tweed-wearing, slightly stocky man dropped 2 of them cold, and the other 2 ran off. Dad walked back to the owner, apologizing with a slight grin, and offered his name and address if the police were going to be involved. We walked back to the car and drove home in silence. It was a shock like putting a car in reverse at 50 miles per hour. Back home, he said, "I can teach you to do that if you want, or I can tell you something that's much easier to do." Of course, I asked what the easier thing was. He just said, "Run like hell, a far better option." And I've never laid a hand on anyone my whole life. Story 44. Yes, avoiding fights and confrontation can make you a coward. Not always, but sometimes. It depends on why you're walking away. If you're walking away because you've assessed the situation, know exactly what you're capable of, and choose not to escalate because it would cost more than it's worth, that's composure. That's power under control. But if you're walking away because you don't know how to assert yourself, because you're scared of conflict, of being seen, of risking anything, that's not maturity. That's avoidance. That's fear running your life in a nice suit labeled peace. A man who won't fight because he's not capable of it isn't virtuous. He's just harmless. And harmlessness is not strength. Strength is having the fire in your chest, the skill in your hands, and the steel in your spine, and choosing when to burn. You say people around you would have made the other person regret it. The problem isn't that they're wrong. The problem is they're playing a shallow game. They want dominance. You want peace. That's fine. But you have to earn the right to walk away. And that only happens if you could hurt someone but choose not to. So ask yourself, if someone disrespects you, lies to you, steals from you, or corners someone you love, do you know what to do? Could you act with clarity and force without flinching? If the answer is no, then you have work to do. Not because you need to become violent, but because you need to stop hoping things won't escalate and start training for when they do. Learn to fight. Speak with edge. Reclaim your body, your voice, your space. Then, when you walk away, it won't feel like shrinking. It will feel like sovereignty. Story 45. Do you live in the United States? Do you want to be charged with domestic violence? Do you want to spend the night in jail? Do you want the police to report on you in local newspapers? Do you want your name to be tarnished? If so, you should seek counseling to address possible anger issues. If you find yourself in situations where this question arises, you either want to take risks or you need to stop associating with certain people and avoid dangerous situations. Story 46. You are selective about the altercations you are willing to participate in. It is the same for me. If someone is just throwing insults and provoking me 9 times out of 10, I walk away and do not deal with it. On the other hand, if someone harms my children, it will be hands-on. Even if I get hurt, my children will know that I will always protect them. Unlike this person. Story 47. It depends on the situation. It is okay to walk away from stupid or petty disagreements. However, if someone is threatening you or your family with violence, that is another matter. I do not like to fight. I avoid petty disagreements because they are not worth fighting over. If someone is directly threatening me or my family, they will learn a harsh lesson. Story 48. Violence is a last resort, but when needed, you should be ready to escalate faster and harder. I say this as a gun-owning, strong, giant, taught-to-fight individual. The last time I actually had to fight outside of a mixed martial arts club practice was 18 years ago in high school with someone who put me in a corner. Every other situation with the potential to rise to violence, I walked away from or was completely indifferent. Like you, I cannot take the risk given my responsibilities and dependence. The fact that you understand shows you already have wisdom on your side. That said, you are not weak unless you cannot defend yourself. Let's keep analyzing the situation as you have described it. Your friends and family are telling you they would have used violence, so it sounds like they are suggesting you do the same. Why is that? Is it because they truly believe potential years in prison are better than letting meaningless words stand? Is it because even if they encourage you to the point of fighting, they have no consequences? Is it just tough talk and grandstanding? My guess is it is a mix. Ultimately, they have no skin in the game and do not care what price you might pay for escalating to violence. Perhaps they are just unaware and lucky. Lucky because they have never found themselves in a situation with real consequences yet. Story 49. Most people do not know how to fight or cannot fight. Most confrontations are pure posturing. Avoiding fights and conflict is perfectly natural, but at a certain point, you may have to stand firm and defend yourself. The way I was raised was that they can say whatever they want, but nobody is allowed to put their hands on you in a way you do not like, except in certain situations like being under arrest. If you do not stand up for yourself, they will take it as a sign that they can do it again or worse. Story 50. Dude, you are being smart and mature. I have been doing martial arts since I was 7. I am 44 now and still training in mixed martial arts, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and wrestling. I know how to fight. From experience in the gym, I can easily handle any untrained person. I am very confident in my self-defense ability and would never get into a fight outside the gym unless I was physically attacked or my family was being attacked. Anyone who resorts to violence because a word hurt them or someone jumped a queue is pathetic in my honest opinion. You are being perfectly sensible and making absolutely the right decision by not fighting if you have that choice. Anyone who disagrees with you is driven by their ego, and egos are fragile. Story 51. It is easy for others to judge another person's choice of response to something since they are not in your shoes when it happens. This might have been seen as cowardice or weakness in some people's eyes, but they are not the ones dealing with the outcome if you had chosen to opt for violence instead. The irony is that if you got severely hurt or were charged with assault for it, those same people would likely have told you that you should not have escalated things this way and simply walked away. They can talk the talk or walk the walk when it happens to them. Story 52. Most of those people bark loud and have never been in a fight. I have been in plenty when I was younger. I always prefer to de-escalate the situation if at all possible. Even a fight you win will end in damage to you. I have aches from a fight over 15 years ago. If you can avoid a real fight, it is always better in the long run. You should always be ready for it and stand your ground, but never instigate or start a fight. Words are not worth starting violence, but if someone wants to hurt you, they will, and you need to be capable of defense and know when to get out. Never turn your back on someone you think might attack you. I have done that before and got slammed in the back of the head. I got lucky the damage was minimal. Story 53. It depends. If conflict is necessary to improve yourself or your team, it can be beneficial. Conflict is not always negative when handled properly, and it often requires cooperation from both parties. It can lead to personal growth. However, you need to choose your battles wisely. They must have a purpose. Some people seek conflict for its own sake, which leads to drama and stress without growth. Avoiding such conflict is the healthier choice. Story 54. Often, where do you find yourself in situations where you have to avoid fights or conflicts frequently? I think you are wise to avoid fights and conflicts whenever possible, but I find it peculiar that you are in that many situations anyway. Story 55. No, but many people will think yes. I remember a thread where a man ran from a mugger and his girlfriend did not. He was called a coward by everyone. He was 17. She should have run as well. He should not risk his life to prove how manly he is. He was a kid, but already he was expected to potentially sacrifice his life. Story 56. Being conflict avoidant and avoiding aggressive situations are two very different things. Conflict avoidance is bending over backwards to accommodate someone who disregards your needs. Avoiding aggressive situations is walking away from someone who is intentionally trying to start a fight. You can be assertive without being aggressive. Stand up for yourself without resorting to violence or cruelty. Some people may interpret assertiveness as aggression, but that is because we do not have many examples of healthy assertiveness in our society. Story 57. No, you are not. You are mature. If you run away from emotional conflict, that would make you a coward, but not from physical conflict. Story 58. No, you are not a coward. Do not listen to the small-minded people around you. Undoubtedly, avoiding violence is the proper course, but only until someone inflicts it on you and will not stop. I am not referring to a single punch or slap. Story 59. It depends on the conflict being avoided. If you are avoiding unnecessary conflicts or other conflicts that do not really matter, and do not allow them to upset you, that is generally a good and positive approach. But if you are avoiding conflicts that have actual consequences if they are not handled properly, then that can be a problem. If you have a girlfriend and there is a conflict between someone else and your girlfriend, and you avoid that conflict and do not stand up for her, how can she expect that you ever will? How can you protect her? If you just walk away from every problem presented, then taking advantage of you can be and probably is very easy. All anyone has to do is cause a conflict and you walk away. Resolving conflict and resorting to violence or making someone regret what they did are totally different things. Every adult, not just every adult man, every adult should be versed in peaceful conflict resolution. You do not have to punch the other person in the face to resolve the conflict, though it can be effective. You need to learn how to talk through things with people. Story 60. It takes more than combat gear to make a man, takes more than a license for a gun. Confront your enemies. Avoid them when you can. A gentleman will walk but never run. Story 61. It is easy to say, I totally would have done that if I were you, when they were not there. Choosing your battles is not cowardice. It is basic risk assessment. Story 62. I am a determined Southerner who is oppositional by nature, has trained in martial arts since age 7, and has a strong tendency not to give up any ground unless it is absolutely necessary. I want you to keep this in mind so that the next thing I say will have the impact it should. There is nothing wrong with avoiding conflict. Violence should never be the first answer, but rather a last resort. Having the ability to walk away is proof of strength and character. Do not let anybody tell you otherwise. Story 63. Sounds like you realize that you do not have time to play games and you do not have time to waste on people who do not matter. You can spend the precious time you have on this earth fighting with people you do not like, or you can spend it with people you love. There is a difference between letting something go and not standing up for yourself. If someone hurts you and you learn not to trust that person but let it go and walk away, that is standing up for yourself. You are simply choosing not to waste any more time on that person. However, if you keep letting the same people hurt you over and over again, then you are failing to stand up for yourself. Story 64. It does not make you a coward or less of a man for walking away. I have never gotten into a fight. I try to avoid people in general, but I am aware that I may have to if I have no choice. There are 2 instances that made me realize that humans are incredibly fragile, and one punch is all it takes sometimes. My brother was about to leave a bar, and as soon as he stepped outside, 2 men got into a fight. One of them was punched hard, fell down, and cracked his skull. He started bleeding profusely to the point that they needed multiple towels to help stop the bleeding. When I was at a club with a friend, police officers showed up, walked past us, and then we noticed a man lying on the ground with blood coming from his head. We did not see what happened, but he probably got into a fight with someone. We stepped outside to leave, and there were multiple police cars. I do not think it is worth getting into a fight, especially since many people carry a gun or a knife. It is always better to walk away. Story 65. No. That is the most important thing to protect yourself. Avoid conflict and physical altercations unless absolutely necessary. Story 66. You are not a coward. You are being mature. I have practiced various forms of martial arts my entire life. I can definitely defend myself and others if needed. However, I almost never use violence if there is an alternative. Most conflicts can be resolved without violence. The only exception is if you are randomly attacked or someone is directly trying to harm you or your family. Practice handling confrontations. Learn to be firm in your speech and actions when required. That is how you avoid violence. Set boundaries and try to diffuse angry people. Do not let situations escalate. and do not let your emotions control your actions. Story 67. Most of those people are all talk. I used to be a pretty violent person, and what I noticed is the same people who say things like that would often turn around and look at you as a complete monster if you hit somebody, no matter how much they deserved it. Something to keep in mind. I personally still think there is a time and place when violence is the answer, but don't ruin your life over what people say they would do in moments when they are safe and sound, talking on their couch, and don't actually have any skin in the game. Story 68. No, avoiding fights is the best thing to do. You are not in elementary school anymore, and fighting comes with legal consequences and the risk of injury to yourself. Fighting should be a last resort, as in when someone is determined to attack you and you cannot get away, so you defend yourself. The vast majority of people who talk tough are just that, all talk. My grandmother taught me at a young age that brains are better than brawn. She used to say, quick wits and a sharp tongue can do a lot more damage than the hardest punch. She was right. People dislike having their bad behavior called out or being made to look foolish. Bullies will leave you alone when they realize you cannot be intimidated or when you make them look foolish in front of others. Story 69. I try to avoid violence, but as an older man, I also realize the society around me occasionally needs me to set a boundary if someone is a danger to others. Most times, just the fact that you are willing to act stops anything from happening. There is a different look to someone who is willing to fight. This has unfortunately led me to confront gangs, people with knives, and individuals I did not think I could beat, often in situations where I feared for my life. This is frightening, but the alternative is to allow someone to use violence to dominate others. As a man, you are society's most capable defender. Those who are strong must protect those who are not as strong. Make yourself strong and capable. Story 70. I have practiced martial arts for most of my life. My teachers have taught me since I was a child, if you can avoid a fight, choose that option, no matter how skilled you are. You never know if someone has a weapon or if they are reckless enough to use it to harm you. On the other hand, imagine you punch someone, they fall, hit their head, and die. This happens more often than people realize. My teachers are some of the best fighters I know, and they avoid confrontation. Pride is not worth dying over. Story 71. Big talk is just talk. Growing up, my dad forced me into boxing when I was 12 years old to make a man out of me. And I did it until my early 20s. In my late 20s, I enlisted in the United States Army, and right after I completed basic training, the war on terror began. I started going to war zones every other year. I wrote the above to add context to this. Only a foolish person gets into fights. Whenever someone talks about how they would beat someone up for something trivial, I always ask the same question. How do you know when a street fight ends? This is the biggest question when considering fighting someone. Realistically, a fight not broken up by bystanders can end in one of two ways. One person is incapacitated or someone runs away. In my opinion, running away before the fight begins is probably the best choice. If you fight someone until one of you can no longer continue, it is bad for both parties. In my life, I have never been in a situation where I was willing to die or kill someone over almost anything, except for military service. Prisons and cemeteries are filled with people who didn't know when to walk away from a fight. I refuse to be one of them. Story 72. If someone is genuinely trying to hurt or kill you and you cannot get away, then you have to fight. But usually it is just someone stuck in middle school who is loud and aggressive to get their way because that is all they really have. It is not worth risking injury, jail time, or lawsuits with them. Sometimes there are intoxicated people, drug users, or those with genuine mental health issues. It is best to avoid areas where they tend to be and those individuals if you can. As others have said, maybe look for new friends. I had some like that back in the day, and their big mouths, poor judgment, and machismo created problems that did not need to happen. I managed to stay out of it after the first time, which happened when they were a little distance away and before I realized it, but I managed to avoid real trouble and soon found other friends. Story 73. No, it makes you smart. Everyone talks nonsense, but when it really comes down to it, they will not do it. No one wants to go to jail. Story 74. Just because you know how does not mean you should. From my experiences, 99% of altercations can be resolved without violence. Story 75. Fights and conflicts are the last refuge of foolish people. They do not solve anything. If you can avoid them, just walk away. There is no cowardice in avoiding harm. Sometimes, very rarely, there is no way out. Then you have to finish what someone else started. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.